Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by.
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Welcome back. This is Inside New Orleans Sports, and of course, as always, we're looking forward to another great show. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We're live from our state-of-the-art Pontchartrain production studios, and as always, we got a great guest for you tonight. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com joins us. We'll be talking LSU, we'll talk Saints, we'll talk Tulane, we'll talk also a little bit about the Pelicans, where they are right now. We have time. We're going to jump into some high school football and also some LSU basketball. They're looking really good for this upcoming season. All that's going to happen on the program tonight. Thanks for being with us. Let's turn our attention now to our great guest, Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com. Jude, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Happy to be able to talk about a lot more sports going on, but some more being delayed. So we're just continuing to juggle these balls in the air, as so many people that are trying to make these games happen are doing. But it's good to be able to talk a little bit about it, which I do at times on 106.1 FM on All Access with Ken Trahan. We take turns hosting at 7 o'clock in the evenings on that program. And what we both do together is own and operate CrescentCitySports.com. And fortunately, we have plenty of great content for folks out there. Our numbers are through the roof. People want to know what's going on. So we're happy to bring all of that information and analysis to them. And fingers crossed, I know my UNO Privateers are practicing. Hopefully we'll be on the airwaves on 106.1 for UNO basketball coming up in November or sometime this year. But again, it's all about wait and see. That's the story of life right now.
It really is. I mean, I've been saying for a long time, again, you can't plan anything over 30 days, but in a lot of cases, just like in my own personal life, it's hurry up and wait. So again, I'm with you on that. You're a guy that, again, that one of the things I love about having you on this program is you cover all sports, you watch all sports, you can articulate, again, what you're seeing within those sports, and something we don't talk a lot about on this program, but something you're really excited about being back is baseball. Baseball has chosen not to go with the bubble situation, much like the NFL is going to do going forward. We've seen it work for the NBA. We've seen it work for Major League Soccer. Talk about the state of baseball right now as we're just getting into the beginning of their seasons.
Well, the bright side may be that because of what has already happened since the regular season has started, players might take things more seriously. You wonder if they did so when the Marlins wound up having an outbreak. Many of them pitchers, which make you think think they might have been fraternizing together away from the park and not
Yes.
their teammates. It led to 6 games being canceled, already a burden there for the league to deal with how to make those up. The Cardinals having to have a series and maybe more canceled as a result. Other teams having the COVID-19 problems. Because they're not using a bubble like the NHL and the NBA, that allows for travel. And I think that also has allowed for the mindset for some thinking that they shouldn't have the lockdown and bunker down mentality when they really should have, and that's caused a major issue for them as a result. So if they have one more outbreak of a Marlins type level, they're going to have to call it, because baseball has other issues going on that's affecting the quality of the game and the future of teams. I talk about pitchers. They have had exponentially more arm injuries for pitchers because of the weirdness of having to restart in the summer, and guys, including very key pitchers, top line ace players, not being ready. So that's a big, big deal. So baseball, they might actually be doing themselves a bit of a favor if it has another outbreak, because the quality of the baseball is not as good on both sides, the hitting and the pitching. The games are very weird to watch. I enjoy watching them, but I feel like I'm watching an inferior product, and I think a lot of fans feel the same way, and I don't know how good that is for the game despite the ratings being good right now, particularly that injury factor again and how it could hurt the future when things are back to normal.
The bubble situation seems to be working out, for, as I mentioned, for Major League Soccer and for the NBA. The first foray into this is Major League Baseball, to see if you can do this without a bubble. NFL, big different story. College football, different story when you talk about the physicality of the games. What do you think is going to happen there going forward? Are they going to take a page from what's going on with MLS and NBA, or are they going to try to go through this much like we've seen Major League Baseball?
Football can do something similar while not truly hunkering down into one spot and being in a bubble situation team by team. But the teams need to react that way, football programs and obviously the NFL franchises, because you're playing one game a week. So that makes things a lot easier. And for college football, a lot of the teams, because they're playing less than 12 games and have moved back their conference championship games, are going to be able to space things out. So that's going to help out as well and deal with little outbreaks as they come. College, I think, is going to be much more of a concern because they're young kids. Some schools are going to have classes. They're going to be exposed to students. There's the temptations, whether you're Tulane, Oak Street, Broadway. There's nighttime temptations of being a college kid no matter what you're being told. Tigerland in Baton Rouge.
I don't care what university you're at.
Correct.
Even Brigham Young.
Same problem everywhere. People want to go out and have a good time with each other. They're young and they want to have fun, and they really don't feel threatened for the most part by the virus like older folks need to be. So we'll see how that works out. College might have a little bit more of a problem, but I hope the seriousness is starting to settle in. And when you talk about the higher the level of football, the more that's at stake, as far as it's important as a professional to act like a professional and deal with things accordingly. And for college players on the major college level, they want to have that exposure of playing these games and have a chance to play professional football. If they're upperclassmen, they want to take advantage of their final games of eligibility, and they want to impress that upon the young guys as well. So you hope maturity and professionalism, depending on the situation, really kicks in. I think football on the college and pro level will be able to get off without a hitch. There's a lot more politics and health concerns and decision makers involved when we talk about high school a little bit later.
No doubt about it. We're going to get into that a little bit later on the program. We will start with the Pelicans, though. The Pelicans issue in the bubble has not been a problem with COVID-19. It's been the inconsistency they've had all season long. The Pelicans are now 1-3 with 4 to play. They have lost to Utah. They got blown out by the Clippers. Very, very close game against Utah in game 1, a game they really should have won. Again, a lot of controversy over, Zion Williamson, his ability to be able to play down the stretch. They solved that with the Grizzlies as Zion got more playing time, and they beat the Grizzlies, but then they take on the Kings in a matinee game today, and they get blown out by the Sacramento Kings, who had not won a game in Orlando since, again, the bubble situation has started. They have the Wizards, the Spurs, the Kings, and the Magic left on the schedule here. Because of the tough schedules of the other teams within the Western Conference, the Pelicans kind of crawl back into this, even with the 2 losses previous. This may be the death nail today against Sacramento. Talk about that first, and then we'll kind of get into what the issues are. Can they play themselves back into this? Is it over? We talked about before the show. I think the class of the teams that are trying to get into the playoffs right now, I think you look at the Portland Trailblazers in the West.
No question, because Portland dealt with injuries throughout the season to key starters. Healthy now, they are the best team out of that bunch. This is a team that was in the Western Conference Finals recently, so it's no surprise that they're now focused, they're playing well. They're probably going to get the 8th seed. I think Memphis, losing Jaren Jackson Jr. to the injury, they were already not playing well. They were already facing the specter of a very difficult schedule, and were the surprise team to even be in a playoff seed when the stoppage came. They'll keep sliding back. The question is, can the Pelicans outplay teams like not only the Spurs and the Popovich factor and him having his team ready to play, but can they outplay these Kings who might gain some momentum from this? And it's clear that the Pelicans are going to be matched up in shootouts against them. We've seen that multiple times now. Can they adjust when they play them again? At least they get the head-to-head against both the Spurs and the Kings, that they're going to have to win both of those games. And don't look now, but Monty Williams' Phoenix Suns, they're undefeated. They won again today. This is a team that's playing excellent basketball, that has young talent, like all these other teams that we mentioned, other than really the Spurs, who are built a little differently. Look, they're going to have to win out, I think, at this point with 4 to play. Can they do it? Who knows? But really, Wizards and Magic in a final game that really won't mean anything to Orlando. Those should be wins. Can they beat those two Western teams they have to beat head-to-head? I'm not going to count them out, because Alvin Gentry, if there's one thing we've learned about teams coached by him, we've seen it, the microcosm in this bubble already. Played well in 2 games, played horribly in 2 games. You don't know what you're going to get, but they could get hot at any time. And who's going to try to guess what they're going to do? We thought we'd get a maximum effort out of them today. And we got absolutely nothing from the opening jump. 49 first quarter points given up. Just embarrassing defense in a must-win game.
Well, and that's where I want to go. I want to go defense first. It has been a problem with this team all season long, the lack of defense. This team is not fundamentally sound on defense. You look from the defensive rotations to recognizing shooters, defending the rim to defending the three-point line. Finding the shooters, again, knowing who the shooters are. Now, again, I understand the youth of this team, and again, it takes some time to learn how to play defense in the NBA. They have one of the better defenders in the NBA in Drew Holiday. But, I mean, again, he's a man on an island in a lot of cases, because the rest of the team is just not defensive-oriented. We hear about Lonzo Ball and his defensive prowess. For the most part, it's been inconsistent all season long. That to me is something that has really stuck out. The other thing, again, is turnovers. I mean, it's constant with this team. Again, the constant turnovers. I mean, you can blame it on the fact that, again, the youth of this team, that individually and collectively they don't play good defense, and individually and collectively, again, they're very casual with the basketball. But it's an issue. It's an absolute issue for this team, and has been all season long.
And how do you not know at this point what your proper rotations are to match up in certain situations? How do you not scout opponents ahead of time, knowing what they're likely to do, and be able to make sure that you have matchups that you can win? On both ends of the floor today, we didn't see that against the Sacramento Kings. And it's been an issue throughout Alvin Gentry's career. He's not a defensive-minded coach. He doesn't have Jeff Bzdelik there with him in the bubble, so that hurts as well. But you'd think this team could come up with a better idea of what it's going to do game to game to be able to match up with. It's a chess game. Opponents are going to have advantages over you, and you're going to have to know how to deal with that and choose your poison. You should have advantages over them that you want to maximize. And sure, Zion Williamson, when he was on the floor against the Kings, he was unstoppable offensively. He's also a liability defensively, but you should be able to plan around that. You knew the matchup was good for you there. You know Brandon Ingram's going to give you consistent offense. After that, there's not a lot of consistency in that bunch, and they should have much more of an identity at this point in the season with the mix of veterans and young players who can score and make things happen. Instead, it's a roller coaster game to game, just like it was during the regular season before the stoppage.
I couldn't agree with you more. And then again, you talk about the turnovers, which again is, look, that is something you have to consciously do. It takes them out of games. It allows opponents back into games. We've seen it all season long. And then again, when they don't turn the ball over, usually they're coming out with a win based on the talent they have. But you get into these games where you're having double-digit turnovers every game, and it's been a problem. It is literally the Achilles heel for this team, and it has been throughout the era of Alvin Gentry here in New Orleans. You take a young team like this, and it's exponentially worse.
And that's where you can flip away from Gentry into wondering about the roster makeup and say, do you have enough people who can initiate the offense so that they can slow a game down, so they can make sure you get good looks and run proper offense in the half court? We know Drew Holiday's not a natural point guard. We know Lonzo Ball has his limitations. With the ball in his hands, he's a much better creator in the open court than he is in the half court, and he struggles there because he's not good shooting off the dribble. He's not good finishing at the rim. And those are your first two top options, and there's a huge drop-off from there. We saw a lot of Frank Jackson against the Kings. If he's hot, he can score one-on-one in bunches. He brings literally nothing else to the table. And then you have a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a rookie type, who's very up and down, and you can't ask a lot of him at this point. So that's where it starts. Now, you can make up for it if you have point forwards, for example. That's not Brandon Ingram.
No.
He's a scorer. He's a one-on-one guy who can create off the double team, but you want to give him space. Outside of that, hey, you have an issue there. You've got to construct your roster so that you get more quality possessions. The NBA nowadays, with the efficiency of scoring and the understanding of analytics and spacing, you absolutely have to have players out there who can get you into your offense, not give up turnovers and blow possessions, not wind up taking bad shots late in the shot clock, and be efficient, because if you're efficient, the percentages are in your favor if you have enough scorers on the floor. That's what we've seen in two blowouts by two teams, a title contending Clipper team, a Kings team that when they get hot, they get red hot. They were much more efficient, and the Pelicans look lost. But it's really defense I'm still more concerned about, because the roster long-term can be tweaked to fix those problems offensively, because the talent overall to score is there. The defense is such a joke at this point, and it's up to David Griffin and his staff, Trajan Langdon and company, to figure out, is this coaching or is this just bad makeup for your roster? It looks like a mix of both.
It is a combination of both, in my opinion. And again, it kind of leads me to my next question. This was good for the Pelicans no matter what, being in this bubble situation. These are playoff type games, no matter whether the fans are there or not. It's a learning experience for these young players. So again, you take that with a grain of salt. You say you're there, you're playing. You sure you don't like, again, what happened against the Kings today, and again, allowing them to just shoot on a baited at times with no defense, just a defenseless effort. You don't like the embarrassing game against the Clippers where it looked like they did not give effort at all. And again, when you're in a situation where your back's against the wall, where it's playoff time, you don't lay an egg like that. Now, there have been some teams that have done that in the bubble. We've seen that, right? But again, the Pelicans should not be in that position. To me, the first thing they need is a veteran alpha. They don't have it, okay? They have not had that since Rondo left, and they need that. Now, again, they need a Chris Paul, Rondo type on this team. Does it have to be specifically a point guard? No. But they need someone, a veteran there that, again, is going to be able to get the attention of these young players and allow them and have their respect going forward. So, again, they're not getting into these games where they're getting embarrassed. J.J. Favors is a nice player. I'm sorry, J.J. Redick is a nice player. Favors is a nice player. So is Drew Holiday. These are supposed to be the veteran leaders on this team. How vocal are those guys? Right. They're not. And it's been an issue really since the beginning of the season. And I asked that question when the season opened. Who's going to be the alpha male on this team? And again, it has reared its ugly head over and over again. So I think that's one thing they have to look at. The other thing is, again, Favors was a nice fill-in here, but I think they have to look for a big. Because when you look at Jackson Hayes right now, he's a couple of years away. I mean, he's still, defensively, he is a liability. Confused. He's going to need a whole offseason, and it's going to be a shortened offseason to kind of get himself up to snuff when it comes to defense. When you look at this team, what are you looking at as some of the needs going? What does David Griffin have to address in this offseason for this team to take the next step?
Well, you mentioned the keys there as far as veteran leadership in a way that can be a vocal pick-me-up type guy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a starter, but it needs to be a key rotation guy who's still good enough to play minutes late. If you want something better than that, you want a guy you're going to throw in the starting lineup, then you have to give up on either Drew Holiday or Lonzo Ball. You've got to pick who you're moving forward with here in the next 2 or 3 years, and then go get somebody else that you think will partner with them better. And it would have to be somebody who's vocal. And that really concerns you about both of them moving forward, because you expect them to be leaders at guard with their talent.
Yes.
But neither one of them are naturally vocal guys, and they need somebody to push them and maybe pull those strings. Holiday's the older player, but he's somebody who can slide over to the 2 guard. And with the right backcourt partner and having a guy like Brandon Ingram out there playing the perimeter as well, you can make that work. Whereas you have to start and continue to project with Lonzo Ball. He's become a much better shooter in catch-and-shoot situations.
Yes.
Does he have more improvement in those areas as a scorer and a finisher and improving at the free throw line? So you have to gamble a little bit more on him, but we know they like him because before they even thought about Brandon Ingram, they made the decision to take his option, to keep him around and control of him a little longer. Maybe that's more seeing him as an asset versus a long-term building block, but again, they need to make those decisions there. And yeah, I look at it as far as what you can do around Zion Williamson and wonder, can they do better than Derek Favors without making a bigger trade and giving up a core piece? Because those big guys who can really run the floor and at least give you something at each rim, protect one end, finish strong at times, and be a garbage man at the other. That's what big men are supposed to do nowadays. And do you really need the double up there necessarily with Zion versus having a guy who's really athletic, who's a more mature Jackson Hayes type? Again, those aren't easy to find either. But it does come back to how good is Zion Williamson going to be. And you and I talked about it before the show. I'd really like to touch on the fact that Zion Williamson went in about a month's time leaving the team from looking in the best shape of his basketball life that we've seen him publicly to looking, I hate to say the word dumpy, but looking a little bit out of shape again and lumbering a little bit, whistle to whistle, at times still having the explosiveness of being short of breath. How does it happen that fast? How do you go from great shape to struggling that much, not just struggling from a cardiovascular perspective, but his body looks different. If this is what we're facing long term with somebody who's already had part of a meniscus taken out, who you really worry about leg injuries moving forward, I'm very concerned about the future of Zion Williamson and wonder if he's somebody, not even thinking about when you lose control of him when he's an unrestricted free agent, are you going to get max value out of him as a healthy player before that time? Because we've seen enough of a roller coaster in his career already to make you wonder. He's 20 years old, but everybody that's on looking and really understands the situation is very concerned about it.
Let me take the opposite tack for a moment, just play the devil's advocate here. When are they going to take the kid gloves off and allow the kid just to play basketball?
Right.
Well, okay. I mean, the limitation on minutes, he never gets, you want to talk about maybe being out of shape. I mean, when you're playing 5-minute spurts, you're not getting into the flow of the game. There were times, again, you saw the Memphis game where he was on the floor with Brandon Ingram and they were dominant down the stretch, something you expect from game to game. He has never been able, it seems like he never has been able to get into the flow of the game this season.
But here's the problem. Those were reasons because of injury and being out of shape. And you cannot play your way into shape when you're a big guy, a very big guy for a basketball player who's carrying all that weight and already has lower body injury concerns. You can't just roll him out there and say, let's play him in 10-minute spurts now and see if he holds up, because when you get fatigued, you're much more likely to have an injury happen. So in that particular case, that's coming all the way from the top with David Griffin, and it's the right decision. You have to limit him because he's a key asset who is not ready to play the 36 to 40 minutes you'd love to get out of him, because they'd be a much better basketball team right now when the opportunity is there to be a playoff.
Got to be next year, though.
Yeah.
Again, literally, he's got to be a 36-minute player next year. It's got to happen.
Well, you don't draft somebody number one overall and think about limiting his
next
minutes
face of the league?
Exactly right. Hey, the only reason why the Pelicans have a chance to be a playoff team the way they set this up is because they wanted Zion Williamson in the bubble. And the reality is, in that month, what happened in July before he rejoined the team? I think the team has to be asking questions and saying, young man, I know you had issues off the floor, whatever they might have been. You've got to be more ready to play. And it's got to be a 24/7, 365 deal when it comes to his body and staying in shape, because it's quite obvious he can put on bad weight in a hurry. And that's not going to fly for him to stay healthy long term.
Let's talk about Alvin Gentry. Look, this is a short turnaround when you talk about the end of the NBA season to the restart in December. It's unprecedented about how quick this is going to happen. Draft, free agency, everything that's going to happen in a short window here. A lot of people like to see Alvin Gentry replaced. Is David Griffin's hands tied a bit here because of the short window before the next season starts? Or is this the year to do it? Again, with this young team trying to build around Zion, building around Brandon Ingram, is this the year you say, okay, Alvin Gentry, we need to replace him?
You have two options, because I've seen enough from Alvin Gentry to know that he's not the guy that's going to get you where you want to go with the talent level you think you have and the future assets you have to add to it. So you either move forward with him, because if it's a short off season, you don't feel like you can make a regime change and really change the way you play and have the proper amount of time to do it, or you bring in a coach in waiting type to add to the staff so he can get a feel for things, start putting his fingerprints on the team, and then be able to make that transition. And Gentry in his mid-60s can move into the front office because he's beloved by Gail Benson and company over there, because he's a good and classy man, and he can certainly help you in certain ways. I don't think coaching an NBA basketball team that has future title aspirations is something he should be doing. So I think it's one or the other. Still, it wouldn't surprise me if a big name came open and they had an opportunity to grab him and believed he was the guy, if they pulled the trigger on that as well. So really three options, but those first two, I wouldn't be surprised if they go one or the other, simply because of the oddity of such a short off season.
As somebody that watches this very, very closely, what would you like to see?
I would like to see the best possible guy take over that David Griffin believes in as soon as possible. When he tried to bring in David Blatt over from Europe, it didn't work when he was the GM of the Cavaliers, because that wasn't what LeBron James wanted, and he wasn't ready to deal with that alpha superstar in that particular situation. If he's targeted somebody along with Langdon, who's an expert on what's going on in Europe, so it can either be here or abroad, and they think they can come up with the right style of play to make this team work, and if you can make the team a unique styled team, that makes it so much more difficult to folks to match up with you either in the regular season or in the playoffs.
Especially with a player like Zion, who's a mismatch anyway.
Correct, and you have to always be innovating in basketball. I'm not saying, and certainly the Pelicans have too much talent to go full Houston Rockets and say we're going to play super small and shoot 53s a game. You don't have to do that, but you can start finding newer ways to win that take advantage of your unique talents. And I think Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are two great building blocks as unique talents that you can create matchup mismatches against other teams. And in the end, we talk about the defense. If you're efficient on offense and you're a team that you know the other team's going to struggle to stop, that gives you a lot of leeway no matter whether you're playing the best or the worst in the league.
One of the issues that's out there that a lot of people have not spoken about is, again, the cap. Because of, again, the fact that the NBA has lost revenue this season, there's a possibility teams may have to shed cap. So instead of thinking you have more cap money, because again, much like we've seen with Jeff Ireland and Mickey Loomis on the football side, we've also seen again a situation in the NBA where you are planning down the line what your cap's going to be. There may be a situation now where teams will have to shed cap just so, again, and really good players just to be under the cap this season because of revenue share.
The NBA really needs to make a reasonable decision about just the next season and create some leeway, whether it's already existing salary that you had planned, because folks were making plans based on what was a reasonable expectation that what the cap was going to be. You can't suddenly do a big slash and then expect all these teams to have places to send their money, because nobody's going to have the cap space to work with you. So they're going to have to come up with something and then reevaluate how their revenue looks after a full what we hope is a regular season, assuming they start in late December for the next one, and figure it out for 22-23. You hope they do it something that way, because it's going to be impossible for teams in the league to deal with it because of how much dedicated contract numbers are so much of it being, all of it I should say, being guaranteed. When you're dealing with that, you're in a situation where the league's going to have to come up with some leeway, and the franchises are just going to have to deal with that lost revenue and still pay the players because there's nowhere to send that money.
Yes, no doubt about it. Our guest tonight is Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll take a quick break. We'll hear from some of our underwriters. We'll come back. We'll start talking about the New Orleans Saints. We'll get into LSU basketball, LSU football, Tulane football, and also high school football before we get out of here this evening. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com is our guest. Jude, I want to start with something that you and I talked about on the radio show. We've talked about on this show. I know you talked about on your radio show. What Jeff Ireland and Terry Fontenot have meant to the New Orleans Saints in the resurgence of this franchise. Fontenot on the pro personnel side, what he's been able to do in uncovering free agents. And Jeff Ireland, you remember again the 3-7-9 seasons, a direct situation from the lack of good drafts. The drafts where, again, we saw a lot of undrafted free agents making the team rather than the draftees making the team. Ireland came here and he's changed that. He's turned this team into a contender. Both guys got elevation in terms of their title this week, which is much needed because I've said forever, you can't lose these guys, especially a guy like Jeff Ireland. There's going to be a team out there that, because he was a former general manager, that's going to come to the Saints one day and say, we want permission to talk to Jeff Ireland to make him general manager of our team.
Right.
And again, them doing some housekeeping to keep their own in-house. Big move for the Saints.
Big move, obvious move. It gives you more control when teams come hunting for that extra help. And as well, you need to reward people for doing a fantastic job. This is a team that's won the most regular season games in football over the last 3 years. It's because they've made fantastic decisions on both sides, in free agency and clearly in the draft, where they've come up with all pro caliber players.
Yes.
But when you add a Demario Davis and fix your biggest need in having an alpha dog type linebacker and be able to do that through free agency because another team's thinking they're upgrading and you wind up getting the better player, that's called doing your homework and knowing how a guy, not only what he's capable of, but how a guy fits into what you're looking to do and asking him to do. And he brought leadership and he brought class off the field. So that's the type of identification you have to make to come up with the type of deals you need to have good veterans that can come in and add to what you already have. And what they already have is a team that's drafted so well in recent years that they're a contender moving forward, even beyond Drew Brees. Their window's not going to close when Drew Brees is gone, and I don't think we ever would have thought that 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep, and again, a lot of that has to do with, again, the work of Fontenot and also Ireland. And so, again, good move on the part of the Saints, Mickey Loomis, Gail Benson, and also, again, Sean Payton for making sure those guys were taken care of. A little better title, a little bit more money, and, of course, they're sticking around. Saints right now doing something a little bit different than we've seen in the past. They got about 170 members of their team staff or that will be housed now at the Lowe's Hotel. It is not mandatory. It is not a true bubble. Payton called it sequestered. Personnel are allowed to go home with their family. Thomas Morstead talked about this week that there will be times that he'll be going home to his family. So it's not a true bubble situation. As far as the training camp goes, they're doing weights, conditioning, and walkthroughs so far. They're in the early parts of it. They're scheduled to undergo conditioning drills and weight room work this week. And then there'll be an OTA-style workouts in helmets and shorts starting on August the 12th, and then the first of 14 permissible full padded workouts 5 days later. What's interesting is Payton usually sets his own schedule here. He has said that he is going to go to the revised NFLPA collective bargaining agreement schedule that has been put out by the Players Association, and he said he's going to follow that to a T on how that goes there. Talk about the sequestering. talk about now, again, slowly ramping this thing up before they really get into a full-blown training camp?
Well, look at the big picture overall. You've got 5 or 6 weeks to deal with where it's just the team together, getting into practices without being able to practice against other teams, without having to have the 2 or 4 preseason games that they originally hoped for. So that's all these people together constantly. So you couldn't necessarily ask them to do one place, stay in the hotel together, and not allow them to leave. But at the same time, now you've given them options, especially for the ones who are settled and live locally, where they can do a little bit of both and have different options as far as breaking the monotony of training camp, which is going to feel much more monotonous now, even with the restrictions and probably not as much of a physical wear and tear. It's all about the mental situation, the focus, and knowing they can spend some time with their families, but still having a really nice situation to go to in the hotel so that they can bond with their teammates. And I think Sean Payton really loves the idea of throwing this olive branch out to all of his players to say, I'm looking for your best interests. But there's also a selfish aspect that says, I want these guys to take advantage of it and come together more and really be bonded and ready to be one unit with one focus to try to win, going into a season where they should already have an advantage over most teams in football because they're such a veteran football team that's already a winner. And because of the way the offseason was completely ruined, those teams that were trying to add pieces and find ways to gel lost a lot of that time. The Saints shouldn't need very much time to get up and running and be ready to play and to be very successful doing it. So Sean Payton sees opportunity amidst a very difficult situation.
Well, and the Loge is not a college dormitory.
Which it couldn't be for it to work.
Right. And it's not a West Virginia resort either.
Right.
But, I mean, again, it's probably the best possible thing they could do in terms of, and if you've seen the photos of the rooms where they're staying, believe me, it is totally first class on where these players are staying right now. So it'll be interesting again how that kind of plays out. And again, what happens within that quote-unquote bubble situation or semi-bubble situation that they have there. But I do like it because, again, the one thing you need right now, no matter whether this is a team that doesn't have a lot of open positions, is camaraderie, coming together. There was a little bit of a split in this team in the offseason with the Drew Brees situation. Things have to be kept to come together, and they have to, again, realize that there's a goal, and the goal this year, like it's always been under the Payton era, is to win a Super Bowl. COVID-19, as far as the opt-out, the Saints did not have any players that opted out for COVID-19. There have been some really good players in the NFL that are not playing this season, and they're opting out for reasons of COVID-19, although they do have 2 players that went on the COVID-19 reserve list, Caden Ellis, Zach Wood, both on the COVID-19 reserve list. Either they have contracted, tested positive, or they were exposed to someone with COVID-19.
Right, and they're going to have these 80-man training camp rosters to deal with, so 10 fewer than the norm, but still plenty enough to be able to deal with situations where guys, if they do have this situation, because they are going to be allowed to go home, they are going to be trusted to do things socially and fill their basic needs away from the field. Hey, this is going to pop up. The Saints, I think, became the 26th team out of 32 already to have at least one player go on that reserve list for COVID-19, so that's going to happen. But again, I just like the whole setup of what they have working for them as far as being a veteran team, and the fact that you mentioned that strife in the offseason. It was, as far as the Saints go, the big news of the offseason with Malcolm Jenkins, Michael Thomas, and of course Drew Brees really setting that all off. I think they're more than ready to come together, and I think Drew Brees has realized what he's needed to do man-to-man with those players, as well as publicly, to say, this is how I feel, but at the same time, I now fully understand what's important to my teammates, and as a leader of a football team, you knew Drew Brees was going to find a way to make that happen. He's doing extra work off the field with Tom House, the former big league pitcher, who's an expert on throwing in general, to be able to get his deep ball back, which is a huge deal as well. So he's showing all sorts of leadership to say, hey, if this is my last year, I'm going to give it my all for you guys. And all those players want to win a Super Bowl in the end, so they're going to rally around him. So I don't worry about that at all. And I have a hunch they're probably going to come together in a big-time way. Health is the only thing that's going to stop them from being a playoff team. And I certainly believe that they can get the job done and get over the hump because they've tried to address the problems that have felled them in the postseason the last couple of years.
You mentioned dropping the training camp roster from 90 to 80, some comings and going. Nigel Bradham is a linebacker. He was signed. Benny Fowler was signed. Again, goings, Taylor Stallworth, who was really a good undrafted free agent for this team and will be playing on another NFL roster this year. He was part of the COVID-19 casualties with, again, the reduced roster, along with Tommy Lee Lewis. And of course, 9 of the players are gone there. we've talked about this in the past, Jude, but this really hurts the undrafted free agents. We've already heard, what is it, Joe Banshee, that again, he's got some accolades. But again, undrafted free agents like him, Callaway, some others who again thought they might have a chance to be able to make this roster. It makes it much more difficult now with, again, not having preseason, not having the ability to be able to practice against another team, and of course now in a situation with, again, the roster the way it is with undrafted free agents trying to make a team that doesn't have a lot of openings.
Remember the Hall of Fame coach George Allen and how secretive he
Yes.
was, and trying, especially from the Dallas Cowboys when he was the coach of the Washington Redskins, he wanted to hide everything. He was looking for spies. The NFL hasn't been able to operate that way because you've had practices around the league in preseason open for the public. You have the preseason games. You don't have a lot of secrets. So you mentioned those undrafted rookies who don't necessarily have as good of a chance because they didn't get to impress during the offseason. But now if they impress in training camp, maybe the guys like Banshee, for example, who I think people know about,
Yes.
might still be a risk to try to float him on a practice squad if the numbers work out, that it would be easier for you to do that versus keeping them. But at the same time, maybe these more unheralded undrafted rookies and even pick up to a bounce around the league who suddenly have gotten it, have found something, who are a good fit for you. Other teams aren't going to know because they wouldn't have had any way to see them practice with you. What they already knew is all they have. So maybe the Saints are going to be able to take advantage of that. And again, you have people like Fontenot and company in the front office who might be able to help maneuver that for you and figure out the best way for Peyton to put together his 53-man roster as well as that practice squad. So that may be a plus because those guys, if they perform well, they're still going to get a chance. And Banshee in particular is somebody who stands out because I think he's somebody who's going to make the 53-man roster because he brings you at least a first two-down run stuffer that they're probably going to need, who's a young guy, who's energetic, and if he plays well on special teams in practice, he'll probably have a job. There will be more, no question. The cornerback position as well.
Yes.
Love Keith Washington out of West Virginia. I think it's surprising that a guy like him, as battle-tested as he is, bounced around a little bit in college, but he certainly saw big-time competition and performed well. Wouldn't shock me at all if he made the team as well, because we talked about the last time I was on the show, outside corner in particular, they don't have a lot of options there, and I'm surprised they haven't made a move yet to add at least one more veteran outside of two very good starters.
In a team that doesn't have a lot of open positions, give me 3 position battles that you think are going to be something that everybody's going to be king on as training camp kicks off.
As far as open positions for starting jobs, I think everybody's going to wonder what's going to happen in the interior of the offensive line. Will Eric McCoy be a fit at right guard so the first-round pick Cesar Ruiz can play the center position? That's clearly what the Saints want to have happen. It may not work out that way, so we'll have to see. I do think the linebacking position is still up in the air, although bringing in somebody like Bradham, who's a grizzled veteran, who's really good, and he is a 3-down linebacker who fell off only because of injury. I'm surprised the Eagles didn't try to bring him back after cutting him for cap concerns. I'm surprised somebody else didn't sign him sooner because he's a really good player with a Super Bowl pedigree who's been around, played well for the Bills as well. But who's going to be that third linebacker? Who's going to be healthy enough to be that third linebacker along with Demario Davis? Because I think Bradham has a really good chance to start. That's important, even though you tend to play only 2 linebackers a lot of the time. You not only have to have 3 solid starters that you can believe in, but at least a 4th guy that you don't think is a liability. And you don't necessarily want to play Craig Robertson that many snaps, even though at least he's a dependable veteran, but he is a bit of a liability at this point in his career. So you definitely want to watch that. And I would say that something I want to keep an eye on is it's important even for a team that I think is going to use 2 tight ends a lot. I would like to see who steps up as the third wide receiver. That's why a guy like Fowler was signed because they believe in Emmanuel Sanders.
Yes.
He's done it. Michael Thomas may be the best receiver in football, certainly played like it the last 3 years. But you've got to have more options than that. Will Traquan Smith step up? Will he become more of a threat if Drew Brees indeed has improved his ability to throw the ball down the field? It's an amazing stat. Drew Brees in the last 2 years has only completed one pass that has traveled, I believe, more than 35 yards in the air past the line of scrimmage. It's amazing he's been as incredible as he still is without being able to do that consistently, but at the same time it shows up against the best teams in the postseason, and that's why the Saints have struggled to score and put away those games.
Couldn't agree with you more. Let's shift gears to the college game. We'll talk about the SEC first. They're now going with a 10-game all-conference schedule. Other Power 5 conferences are either followed suit, they're expected to follow suit. The Southeastern Conference now is going to start on September the 26th with a new kickoff of the 2020 season. And of course, when you talk about that, their conference championship game is going to be played on December the 19th in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And that was rescheduled from December the 5th. And the schedule will include one mid-season open date on December, and then I believe on December the 12th for all schools. My first question is, 14 teams in the SEC, 10-game schedule, all conference. How do they make that work?
Well,
how do they make it work fairly?
Fairly is the question you have to wonder. I don't know
Right.
how they're going to make it work as far as something that a majority of the teams in the conference will agree on for adding 2 more cross-division opponents that will seem fair.
Right.
Those negotiations must be pretty serious right now. But I understand why they've done it, and the SEC was a little late compared to the other conferences. I think the Big Ten led the way, then the Pac-12, ACC doing 10+1 in-state, so basically at-home non-conference games. I know why they did it, because if you're not guaranteed to have very many people in the stands,
right.
the people in the stands for these non-conference home games are why you're writing those big checks to play these out-of-conference teams. So if you can eliminate that expense in a year when you're losing revenue on
Right.
fans in the seats, you make that switch and then you deal with the repercussions later. Now you can ask, why aren't they playing 12 conference games? Well, it is smart to give some leeway if teams have outbreaks so you can reschedule and have
Yes.
those gaps to be able to work with. That's why I was a little bit surprised that the SEC is starting a little bit later, in late September,
Right.
and not giving themselves even more area of leeway as far as those gaps go in the schedule. But I also understand why they did that as well, because they're also thinking, look, we can take as much time to figure out our house and get it in order and make an agreement here. I think they may regret if they have one major breakout and don't have the leeway later because they didn't do it. But I would have liked to have seen them play earlier as a result. And I also would have liked them to do something like the ACC is doing. It would have been nice to see LSU still be able to bring Nichols in and give them something, even if they renegotiated
Right.
it. Big check for their athletic department. But I'm also happy to see those schools like the Southland trying to play 12 games, like the American now
Yes.
with Tulane filling out their 12-game schedule that we'll talk about as well, I'm sure. It's important for them to play the games because at least the TV exposure will bring in a little revenue, no matter if there's anybody in the stand. So it's economics
Right.
playing here as well as safety, and that's why decisions are being made like they are. The big boys and everybody follow.
Yes, no doubt. A couple things. First of all, if a student athlete wants to opt out for the COVID-19 reasons, their scholarship is honored. So again, they don't have to worry about that. The SEC is, again, as I mentioned, revised the football calendar from August the 7th through the 16th. Schools are permitted to conduct up to 14 hours of strength and conditioning and meetings and walkthroughs. Beginning on August the 17th until the opening game, schools are allowed 25 practices with a limit of 20 hours per week practice time, and a 5-day acclimation period is also required. 2 days in helmets only, 2 days in shells, and the 5th day in pads. Again, the schools have to give the student athlete at least a minimum of 2 days off each week. Also, again, they're trying new helmets out right now. If you're listening to what's going on up at LSU right now, the players are complaining about these new helmet shields, saying they're not being able to breathe. So it'll be interesting to see, again, how that kind of plays out. As far as LSU goes, they have been now in the Amway college football preseason poll. They are number 5 in the nation. Clemson is 1, Ohio State is 2, Alabama is 3, Georgia's 4, LSU 5, Oklahoma, Penn State, Florida, Oregon, and Notre Dame round out the top 10, with Auburn coming in at 11th. So LSU, again, even with 20 players going to the NFL, is still looked at as a top 5 team preseason.
They deserve the respect as the defending national champion, and despite losing all of that talent, they still have so much coming back. And I think folks from the outside looking in say there's some unknowns, starting with Miles Brennan at quarterback, but LSU's going to be in every football game they play because they're still going to score a whole lot of points with Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall and company, and Eric Gilbert's going to be a true freshman sensation at tight end coming in, maybe the best tight end recruit in a generation who's going to be a weapon in that offense. People know that, and the defense will figure it out. You believe in Bo Pelini, and now everybody believes in Ed Ogeron's ability to field a great football team.
Question marks, battles in the upcoming training camp as this team prepares for the upcoming season?
Well, it's about the defense and the concern there as far as what will they have as pass rushers go. They're going to have to do it, I think, situationally. When they get teams in down and distance, they're going to be able to bring different speedier, smaller options in there because there is a transition going from a 3-4 to a 4-3. They don't necessarily have natural defensive ends. A guy like T.K. McClendon is penciled in as a starter, virtually no experience, a converted player. They have 3 key defensive linemen who were converted players from other positions within the last couple of years. They have the talent to be very good. They're not moving there for need. They're moving there because that's where the staff sees their talent best lies. So that's going to be important. Depth at linebacker behind the transfer Cox from North Dakota State and Damone Clark, who should be a really good one, and maybe the next guy to make a Patrick Queen type rise to be a high draft pick. But where's the depth there? There's real concern at that spot. And then on the offensive side of the ball, the running back situation will be interesting to watch, but it's going to work itself out. They have enough guys. It's about the interior of the offensive line. If Liam Shanahan can be the center for this team, the transfer from Harvard, he's got a great deal of experience, but not at center, but he has the skill set to do it. If he can plug in there and get the job done, then everything else will fall into place because they're really deep at offensive guard, and they think Dare Rosenthal's ready to be the left tackle to replace Sadiq Charles, in part because he got so much experience playing for Charles, who was dealing with a suspension last year. And it's much more important, though. I think we learned that from Drew Brees, but we're learning that across college football. As quickly as quarterbacks get the ball out of their hands, if the interior of your line is good and can hold that pocket, that'll give the quarterback enough time to make things happen. And if the center position works out, everything else should fall into place.
Especially this year when you have unknowns at quarterback.
Right.
Okay, with Miles Brennan, Peter Parrish has left the program, so that means the backups are Max Johnson, freshman, T.J. Finley, freshman.
Right.
So, I mean, again, you get a COVID-19 outbreak, you get an injury, you got a freshman coming in and get started for you.
Right.
And as it is now, Miles Brennan doesn't have a lot of time, but at least, again, he knows the offense. He's been in the offense now for a couple seasons.
I think Brennan's going to be fun, and he's going to play well, and it's great that he's put on some 25 pounds of muscle since he got onto campus. It's been a long road for him based on the way he's built. They still need to keep him healthy because there's no way to expect to win now against an all-conference schedule, no non-conference games to break these young quarterbacks in. If something happens to Brennan, you're not going to have anybody who's truly ready to play. Although I think everything I'm hearing about Max Johnson, the son of Brad Johnson, the Super Bowl winning quarterback, played in the NFL 14, 15 years, I think Johnson's going to be okay, but not right now. It's got to be Miles Brennan's show. So keeping him healthy, we saw Joe Burrow take some shots in his 2 years as LSU quarterback because he's willing to extend plays and he was physically able to take them. Miles Brennan isn't that guy. You don't want him running around, especially with the lack of depth.
Yep. Let's switch to Tulane. Oh, by the way, Greeny fans, Tulane got 5 votes in the Amway Coaches preseason poll. So again, Tulane getting 5 votes, getting respect, all coming out of the box this year. Now, AAC members, as Jude mentioned before, they're going to be allowed to play 8 conference games and 4 non-conference games. Tulane has added South Alabama. They'll play them at South Alabama on September 12th, and at Southern Miss on September 26th. That is to make up for the loss of the Northwestern game, Northwestern in the Big Ten now, and also Mississippi State. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Look, it's the same question we've talked about throughout the offseason, right? The biggest question for this Tulane team is, like LSU, at the quarterback position.
Right, and Keon Howard has to be the guy because it's the same deal at Tulane. After him, only true freshman. So Howard should be the guy who steps in and gets the job done. And at least if he's not dynamic, if he's somebody they find isn't a consistent passer, this coaching staff has been down that road before. Bill Hall had to deal with it as the offensive coordinator last year with Justin McMillan. Even far more consistent before him and before McMillan was Jonathan Banks the year before. And Tulane runs the ball well enough and knows how to get the ball in the hands of skill position players outside enough to win enough football games. If that's all they're going to be again this year, their potential would be much greater. If Howard is better than that, well, that's okay because they're recruiting well at quarterback and eventually they're going to hit. Eventually they're going to get the job done there. But there's belief on what they've been able to do on defense. Up front, led by Patrick Johnson, an All-American level pass rusher who's going to play in the NFL. Cameron Sample and company, talent on the back end. They can match up in a conference where folks are going to score points anyway.
Right.
It is going to come down to your ability to either score a lot of points or manage the ball on the clock. I'm sure Willie Fritz will figure it out with Howard, and he has to keep that young man healthy too, even though he can move a little bit and be a threat as a runner. They'd have to have a lot of faith in the backups that they can play right away, and I doubt they have much more faith than what LSU has to ask a true freshman to step in and take those bullets.
Right, and the best friend for Keon Howard is that stable of running backs that he
Sure.
has. Very deep, and again, when you look at it from the coach's standpoint on this poll, they're respecting Tulane because, again, there's a few NFL players on this roster, and of course, Willie Fritz has been able to do. By the way, AD Troy Dannon said that he doesn't anticipate fans being in the stands at Yeoman this season, so it'll be interesting there.
And that's why they agreed to play these 2 road games,
Right.
because they agreed to open up the new stadium in Mobile for South
Yes.
Alabama to fill that gap in their schedule, mutually beneficial. And they agreed to go play a Southern Miss team that is an old battle for the bell rival that they just beat in a bowl game. So they'll have all the revenge-minded motivation. Well, the Golden Eagles, and they play them at home, but it's a lot different when it's an empty stadium.
Yep.
It's fair football, doesn't matter where you play it. So Tulane able to solve problems because they lost the games against Northwestern and Mississippi State, but they got more winnable games
they
out
did.
of it.
I know, absolutely. No, there's no doubt about that. Let's grab a call, and then I want to get into some LSU basketball. We want to finish off with high school football. Toby is in Gretna. Toby, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, Toby.
Do you think Ruiz is too light in the butt to play guard? And I thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think he was too light in the butt to be the best center in the Big Ten.
Right.
And I don't think they have any necessarily vision of him playing guard. But if they have to, then yeah, it's a real concern. They have to believe in McCoy's ability to play right guard because you want that to be the power side of your line under normal circumstances. And I mean, I'm projecting, I don't know what they're thinking, and they have much more scouting information than I do. But you would think if Ruiz wasn't ready to play center year 1, he'd project much better as a left guard. And we've seen Andrus Peach struggle to play on the right-hand side of the line. Right. And I don't think they want to make that flip. I talked about it earlier that it's a competition of sorts, but I think in the end they're going to force Ruiz at center, McCoy at right guard to happen.
And it's good. Look, you can do that with Drew Brees at quarterback because he's making the line calls.
Right.
It's not on Ruiz to make the line calls. He just got to be able to block the guy in front of him.
And if McCoy has to help, they'll be able to arrange that and make that happen. A little bit of communication in the trenches isn't that hard to do for offensive linemen. They're right next to each other. They're surrounded by veterans. They'll be able to figure it out.
No doubt about it. Some really good news for LSU basketball. When you talk about Will Wade, he has been an excellent recruiter. They should be a national championship contender this year. Javonte Smart, Trenton Walford, Darius Days have all foregone the NBA draft. They're coming back to LSU. Charles Manning and Andre Hyatt are returning from last year's team. They've added 2 7-footers, Josh Gray and the Washington transfer Brian Penn Johnson. Of course, Shaquille O'Neal's son, has transferred over from UCLA. Also, the Tigers picked up transfer Josh LeBlanc, who came from Georgetown. He went to Madison Prep in Baton Rouge. They have a top 10 recruiting class. And of course, they picked up Cameron Thomas, 4-star guard Jalen Cook, Mwani Wilkerson, and Eric Gaines to round out that very, very deep and strong LSU basketball roster.
Yeah, the roster is incredibly deep, incredibly talented. There's reason to believe that they're going to be a national contender because all Will Wade has to do is figure it out. You talk about the challenges and the struggles of an Alvin Gentry with the Pelicans figuring out rotations. Yes. It's even much more difficult in college basketball. 40-minute games, how am I going to make it work? How am I going to make these combinations? Continue to be hungry and work together. And you have so many 4- and 5-star guys now. Will they be able to play together? But you bring back that veteran experience. And Trenton Watford in particular, a 5-star guy that under different circumstances might have stayed in the draft and moved forward. They're very lucky to have him back because he could be point forward if you need him to be. He's so tremendously talented at 6'10". It wouldn't surprise me at all amongst a team of players capable of being stars if he comes out to be the true star of the group. And Javonte Smart did a nice job last year having to take over point guard duties. He might be much better off because they have other options that he can play off the ball because he's the type of guy who can get himself to the basket, a physical scorer. They might be able to get so much more out of the talent that's coming back because of so much they have coming in.
And what was the problem last year? They didn't have depth on that roster.
Correct.
He's got depth on this roster this year.
And he wants to play fast. He'll play fast this year.
No doubt about it. Just a quick note before we get out of here. We've got about 20 seconds left. High school football, which you're intimately involved in. We're going to start October the 8th?
I hope we start October the 8th. It's up to the folks in Baton Rouge, not the folks in the LHSA offices,
Right.
the folks in the governor's mansion and the Capitol to make that decision. But I feel like we might be coming to the downward trend based on what I've been reading the last few days with the numbers. I feel like they feel that way as well in Baton Rouge. And if you have a 7 or 8 game regular season and a full playoffs, it's a lot better than nothing, especially if you wind up even having a few fans being able to attend to, especially families getting to see their kids play.
And of course, you can always check out everything in the prep sports at CrestCitySports.com, and of course, the Roundup Show, right?
That will, whenever there's football,
Right.
Friday nights, 106.1 FM. Reporters from around the state will have all the scores, all the information you need, starting at 6 o'clock all the way to midnight. We're going to do it in October.
There you go. Jude, thanks for being with us. Jude Young, CrestCitySports.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television, 9 o'clock on Friday night, and now Saturday afternoon at 5 p.m. So again, another showing for you on Pelican Sports Television. You'll be able to catch me on the radio very, very soon. We're getting there. I'll let you know when, again, we can announce that, but it's getting very, very soon. I'll be back on the airwaves. I want to thank Jude Young for joining us on the program. Special thanks to our underwriters who underwrite this program and make it possible. We appreciate them so much. We appreciate you tuning in each and every week and watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Also, thanks to the WLAE Productions staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Alex Chacon, Tommy Faley, and my director, William Hill. For Jude Young, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.